SpaceWatchers. This is Space Café Radio, your channel about trends, great people, and awesome conferences. I'm Chiara Monter, event coordinator in our SpaceWatch.Global team. This is another episode of our ISU Space Studies program series, live from Oeiras, Portugal. The SSP is a unique and intense 2-month professional development course for postgraduate students and professionals of all disciplines. On the final day of the SSP22, I had the chance to talk to some of the participants about their team projects on the day of the final presentations. In this episode, I talked to Madin Maseeh from the team project International Cooperation on the use of the Chinese space station. Enjoy our conversation. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're here. We've seen 3 presentations so far, 1 more to go. We're just sitting here in the lobby. Can you briefly introduce yourself and what you do?
Yes, I can. So I'm Madin. I'm from the Maldives, and it turns out I'm the first Maldivian in an ISU event in its entirety of its existence. So it's really cool. I'm the 111th country. So that's pretty cool. And I am part of the TP International Cooperation on the use of the Chinese space station. And we just finished our presentation, which I'm pretty sure you saw the entirety of. And so that's where I'm from and what TP I was in.
Fantastic. Thank you. Can you give a bit more of an insight about the TP? So, of course, International Cooperation, but what was the goal? How was it introduced to you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. If you had asked me this question 4 weeks ago, I would have said, I have no idea. I think it took us almost halfway through the entire SSP experience to really start to even get an iota of an understanding of what is really expected of us. Because when you talk about a topic like international cooperation on the use of the Chinese space station, you're like, okay, but what can we do as a group of independent participants from around the world? Like we started with questions like, are we supposed to provide frameworks and everything? But at the end of the day, what we realized was really the goal that the main sponsors, which is the Academy of Sciences Center for Excellence in China, what the main goal was really to make sure that we propose either a scientific project or some kind of a framework that will lay the foundation for greater cooperation in the future. So once we realized that, then we start to explore, okay, what are the kind of scientific themes we can really help other countries rally around? And also, what are the existing frameworks we can use? So from the get-go, we really didn't want to dive too deep into existing geopolitical tensions and legal issues that will just completely make our project unfeasible. So it took us a really long time to understand it. But at the very core, we just have to propose a good mission that everyone can rally around.
That does make a lot of sense to break it down slightly because it is such a big topic in such a big sphere as well. So I've seen the presentation, but for our listeners, could you explain what it is that you came up with? What was your proposal?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very proud of it, actually. And so the idea that we came up with, we have this research funnel in our executive summary, and I think it's a handy tool to really help you navigate this concept into an experiment. So we really started by finding a theme, a thematic area that we felt was worthy enough for international cooperation to be needed. And then we identified the need for self-sustaining ecosystems, which are one way to think about that is like a giant terrarium. But we need these quote-unquote terrariums in planets like Mars if we want to settle there because we need to produce our own food, but we also cannot rely on continuous shipment of fertilizers and seeds and everything because we want to make sure that we can grow an ecosystem that sustains itself. And so from that theme, we decided to do some literature review, identify a scientific concept that can then be turned into an experiment. And so the scientific concept we found out through our literature review was using supercritical fluids to build more efficient, self-sustaining ecosystems. And in space, you call them CELSS, which stands for Controlled Ecological Life Support Systems. Now, we found supercritical fluids to be a very interesting component of this because it's, number one, not very well known how it behaves in space, in microgravity environments. We know a lot about supercritical water, but not so much about other fluids. And so we decided, let's do something novel, but also something that can contribute to this thematic area that we found. And so our experiment boiled down to using supercritical carbon dioxide to assess how well does it extract the nutrients from algae, because algae can grow in human urine, human feces, which is great to convert waste, but then see how those nutrients affect the growth of plants. So you have supercritical carbon dioxide dissolving the algae, taking the nutrients and feeding plants, which then we can eat. And before eating, we're going to measure how good they are. But the idea is that the experiment will contribute to the first step in growing actual self-sustaining ecosystems and that are more efficient than traditional ones.
It sounds so fascinating. Maybe just as a quick follow-up question, can you explain what supercritical actually means? Because when I heard it the first time, I was like, oh, that sounds like it's very important, but I feel like it has a bit more meaning to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've heard this word so many times. I feel it's something that is very common. But no, supercritical fluids are very interesting enough. The first thing you need to understand is supercritical fluids are not this magical new compound or anything, or a new type of molecule. What it really is a new state of matter. So it's a physical description of fluids. It's not a chemical description. What that means is that we describe, for example, if we call water in its gaseous form, we call it water vapor. When it's liquid, we call it just water. And when it's ice, we call it ice cubes, for example. So supercritical fluids are essentially completely different from either one of these states individually. The way you achieve this is by breaching what's called the critical point. And the critical point is essentially the pressure and the temperature in a fixed volume environment. So if you have a box and you heat something and the pressure keeps increasing and the temperature keeps increasing, you reach a certain point after which what's inside of it cannot be described by either a gas or a liquid. So it starts acting like both a gas and a liquid. And that has a lot of interesting consequences, because usually gases have really low viscosity, which means they are very easy to move around and they can go through cracks and everything. But they're terrible at dissolving stuff because they have very low density, very low solubility. But supercritical fluids share some of the advantages that gases has to offer in terms of diffusivity, but also is more soluble than a normal gas. When we say supercritical fluids, what we're really referring to are fluids of existing matter like carbon dioxide that behave both like a gas and a liquid.
That makes it a lot clearer. I think you also explain it very well. Okay, so now we've had these important keywords: international corporation, self-sustaining. With all of this, what was your motivation to go into this TP, and what has been your experience going through this whole process?
Okay, I'll start with the motivation for this TP. This TP was definitely one of my three choices. But when I chose it mainly because it had that international relations aspect. So I had no idea that it's going to be something that required a scientific project at all. What I found out after joining was that international cooperation and international relations are intertwined with the scientific aspects of a space mission, because space is still a very contested and uncharted area. And so while I initially applied for the project hoping to really understand the geopolitical aspects of it, it became more like, how do we use a bottom-up approach to really foster international cooperation? So one thing I learned is that it's really through projects like this and the normal people, the everyday people, that can really push the governments to cooperate at a future stage. And one of the things that we learned throughout this TP was that there was a TP in the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, on the international cooperation about the ISS with the Russian counterparts. And at the time, it seemed really impossible, but now we know that it did happen. And to think that a TP was there before it happened and try to tackle that problem, I think that's really what makes this TP pretty exciting as well.
Oh, wonderful. That's really interesting. So nice. You might really lay the future groundwork for international cooperation. I've heard from some of the other groups as well. It is quite a stressful time. It's very time intensive. You work together with a group of 23 different people with big ideas. So did you experience any major setbacks or challenges throughout this process?
Yeah, I would say yes, but I would also say this is something we are very proud of. We consider ourselves to be BTP, and you would have heard this phrase in the presentation, but a lot of people don't really know what it stands for. So internally, it stands for Best Team Project. And yeah, so it's a little cheeky move we did for the presentation, but really it's something we hold very dear to ourselves. And the reason is, one of the first things we did when we got together was we decided not to have a leader. We decided not to have a project manager, quote unquote, because we felt that we were such a diverse group and there was so much to do that no single person should both bear the burden of leading the group, but also no single person can possibly do that. And so we decided to run it in a very UN-like discussion format. So we had a UN-style moderation, we had rotating moderators, and for each task we had functional leaders. So every time we had a deliverable, we would have leaders for different aspects, but no single project manager calling the shot. So we had different people show up and really take the lead when needed, but at different points in time. So in a way, throughout the entire multiple weeks that we worked on this TP, almost everyone showed up at the right point. And that is something we're very proud of. And I think the one challenge was really getting everyone on board the discussion aspect, because initially there were a lot of people who thought it was a pointless waste of time and everything. But in the end, once everyone really settled into the flow, they realized how valuable it was, because then we created an environment where healthy discussion could happen. Healthy disagreements could happen. We really promoted voicing out disagreements and conflict in a healthy, safe environment. And I think that is really why we were able to, in such a short amount of time, agree on a theme. Previously, we had 5 or 6 different thematic areas we identified, and everyone was trying to get theirs selected. But in the end, we really found a way to make sure everyone's interests were accommodated. And that is that we try to replicate in our presentation in the way we conducted it, but also is something we really cherish and was at the heart of everything we did.
Amazing. I think that's a very good approach to take because indeed so many different backgrounds, so many different ideas and walks of life. So it's really nice to see such an agile approach. Now, my next question I know might be a bit difficult to answer because you need to let this whole thing resonate with you, but what has been a real highlight throughout this whole TP journey?
TP journey. There's been multiple highlights, but I think for me, one of the biggest highlights was to see how everyone around me was so capable. I think that's been something that has been very refreshing and really inspiring, honestly, because oftentimes I think everyone feels like they need to do more or they need to be making sure something is working right. But in our case, again, I think it is just as a result of the way we worked, but it really inspired me seeing how some people really express themselves and their abilities and their skills in a way that I didn't expect when I first came in. So, for example, the website you show was built by some of our own people, the videos and the editing and the creativity. These are things I didn't see. And I think the highlight were really the people for me and the fact that they had the courage and also they felt the safety to really express that and show their skills. And yeah, that would be in terms of the TP, one of the biggest highlights.
Wonderful. That's really nice to hear. Now, my final question is looking out to the future beyond SP. For one, can you give a bit of an insight of what's going to happen with your TP project? Is it going to grow further? Are you going to continue working on it? And are there any other projects that you're going to take out of this SSP?
Yeah, I'll start with what's going to happen with the TP. Because we are sponsored by an institution in China that is working with the Chinese Space Agency, it is very likely that we will continue talks and we will continue to refine the idea and everything that we have. And from our chair's perspective, they definitely want to make this happen. And so I do expect to see a time when this does happen. And I'm really excited for that. I can't tell you exactly when that'll happen because with any of these kind of space station related projects, it takes time. Now, as for projects outside of TP, yeah, we actually have something really cool happening. And you would have heard of this many times throughout the entire SSP in different occasions. So we have this thing called SmallSort, which is like a little meme that has grown out of SSP. But what it really represents is an idea and a vision. And it started off as with a simple desire to really help emerging nations to get access to space and to benefit from space and to solve their problems using space. But in the specific context of this SSP, what we really work around trying to help the Maldives, which is where I'm from, fight climate change and adapt to climate change using space. And so all the amazing people here got together and came up with the orbit and the payload and everything for a satellite mission that would be ideal for the Maldives. Now, obviously, we're not going to immediately fly the satellite, but through that, what really sparked was a movement which I'm now a part of, and hopefully everyone here is also a part of, is a movement to really bring a space program and a space organization in the Maldives that can really make all these ideas we have in this SSP a reality. And to that extent, we have now a space research organization in the Maldives, which I'm a part of, which I'm really excited about. But everyone here is also a part of that because they're willing to help. And we're going to organize some really cool events and also one day hopefully launch SmallSort. So that's really the hope. And I'm really excited for that. And the Maldives government and some of the people involved are also very supportive of this. And so for me, this has been one of the best outcomes of SSP. And I think this is really what the SSP was designed for, to really spark these kind of movements.
So incredibly cool. I can't wait to see what happens with SmallSort. And I think then we definitely have to sit down and do another interview as soon as something happens there. Thank you so much for taking the time after all the presentations, after all the stress, to sit down with me for this interview. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kara. I do have to be a part of Microgravity's presentation as well. There's going to be a little surprise for you there and for everyone here. But yeah, it was a pleasure, and I am more than happy to sit down with you and talk about SmallSort.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. If you want to stay on the pulse of space, visit our website our mothership at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletter. Don't forget to check out our full program of Space Café radios, where we offer interviews, insights, and editorial comments on the space sector. Thank you all very much for listening, and with that, I leave you for today. And don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Bye!